A lot of our existing customer relationships come through deep partnership we have with Akamai. We're obviously looking for similar partnerships with AWS, with GCP. Looking for more places to expand our product offering so that we can access again, kind of coming back to a lot of these high volume use cases, like how do we expand into other CDN markets, web application firewalls. How do we tap into those and really make it easy for our customers to say, here is a service that I use. How do I monitor it effectively?
Hi, this is your host Sapna Bhartiya and welcome to TFR Let's Talk. Today we have with us Todd Persen, CTO at Hydrolix. Todd, it's great to have you on the show.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
First of all, congratulations for joining Hydrolix as CTO. We cover Hydrolix a lot here, so our audience, they do know. But since you are kind of new to the company, so I would like to hear your perspective. How would you define Hydrolix? What do you folks do?
The best way to describe hydraulics is a real-time streaming data lake for logs. And so I've been in this space for a while. I actually have founded two previous companies. So Influx Data was my first company. So we built the Influx DB time series database, focused a lot on metrics and kind of IoT use cases. And then started a company more recently, Era Software. And we did very similar stuff to what Hydraulics does. So really focusing on decoupled storage and compute, being able to do massive scale. And we see logs as obviously one of the biggest growing pieces of the observability story. And Hydraulics is kind of squarely focused on handling kind of the largest customers from a log scale.
Thank you. Now, I would also love to know a bit about your own background, your own career in this space.
I've been doing this for a while. When I first started, we didn't really have the term observability. So a lot of the stuff that we did at InfluxDB was kind of helping to define the time series database category. We were kind of one of the early leaders there, and had an open source product that we had in the market for a long time, and built a kind of enterprise product around that. And so, I've kind of been watching the rise of observability and the data volumes growing. And really over the last 4 or 5 years, kind of as I founded Era Software, that company was acquired by ServiceNow. I've just been watching, steadily these double digit, 40, 50% growth rates in logs year over year. We've gone from the point where, terabytes a day seemed like a lot of data, from a logging perspective. And now, 100 terabytes a day is not that uncommon. So we're seeing customers now in the multi-hundred terabytes to petabyte range of logs per day. And we see that trend is just going to keep growing, more systems generating more data. And so, really having been in this space and kind of seeing a lot of what's demanded from data infrastructure to be able to handle this data at scale. And really seeing a huge opportunity for what we built at Hydraulics to be able to go after some of these largest use cases. We focus a lot on CDN logs right now, but a lot of our customers are in media, gaming, things like that, where data volumes and customer traffic are really, really large. And so being able to handle those current needs, as well as be able to have headroom to expand into the future and be able to support that log growth year over year.
It's not wrong to say that we kind of live in a data driven world. Volume of data that we are creating will continue to grow, and it might become a even massive challenge for organizations to manage it. It's not just about managing it, having the talent, but also cost. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you have seen, and also your career span in this space, when it comes to the log data to the amount that at which it scales? So what challenges it poses for organizations, and then we'll talk about how hydraulics and companies like hydraulics help them.
You're right. Cost is a huge factor. We've seen in a lot of cases kind of where this market has gone, that there are a lot of use cases where the data volumes of logs are so massive that customers, in some cases, have to make that decision. Like, do I even want to keep this data? Like, is it too expensive for me to actually get value out of keeping it? And that's becoming more and more common. And so you're absolutely right. Like, the data volumes keep growing. And so I think one of the places where we're looking for innovations in this space is like, how can we handle these larger data volumes more efficiently? And very few customers want to say, oh, I'm gonna challenge my organization to reduce their log volume next year. Like that never happens. That's not successful. And I think in a lot of ways, um, those logging sources are not always within a company's control. It could be, like in the case that I mentioned earlier, like CDN logs, where you're looking at these sort of transactional logs, where each request to your service generates a log line. That vendor is generating those logs, not you. And so if you want to be able to store those, you have to support that format. And especially as we look at, the push to the cloud, all these hyperscalers have all these different services that are all generating their own logs, and the choice is, do I want to store them? Do I want to try and get value out of them, or do I want to, maybe just dump them in some sort of like stale archive or like an S3 bucket or something like that? And so I think that data volume cost challenge is real, getting more difficult all the time. And I think it's like you said, it is a data-driven world, and I think the more opportunities we can find to help companies efficiently handle that data at scale, I think there are kind of a lot of hidden opportunities to help with business analytics, with security and threat detection, and every place that you can bring those logs into a platform and work with them gives you an opportunity to be able to do something valuable with that data. AI training, there are all kinds of places where the data is critical, but being able to store it and utilize that data in a cost-effective way, I think is a bigger and bigger challenge for these companies.
We're also seeing new use cases emerging. Of course, we are also seeing heavy usage of AI or even Gen AI, which once again is all about data. What are some of the new use cases which you see, and even they make you kind of sweat and worry that, hey, this is going to create even bigger amount, bigger volumes of data? What are those potential use cases?
We're already sitting on some of those, and I think CDN is a big one. It's really kind of one of the highest volume data sources. We see a lot of. I mean, there's a lot of application and infrastructure logs as well that obviously has gotten a lot bigger with the rise of containers and Kubernetes. These like very large orchestration systems have so many subsystems that all generate logs. At this point, there's not anything out there yet that makes me sweat. I feel like we've got the tools in hand to be able to solve them, but there are a lot of kind of pre-existing tools. If you look at Elasticsearch, it's been around for at this point 15 something years. We've seen a lot of Elasticsearch appear in logging use cases, and now we've kind of reached that point where I think a lot of companies are reevaluating that investment, that decision, because the complexity of running an Elasticsearch cluster at scale, there's the cost of the infrastructure, the operational overhead. We see that as something that's becoming an increasingly difficult challenge. Those companies are starting to sweat because they don't know what they're going to do next. And I think that's where we see some of the innovations that we've done at Hydrolix. We kind of see shifting those workloads to a more efficient platform is a way to be able to sort of like to manage that challenge. But I think whether it's hyperscaler logs, whether it's model training with AI or RAG, those things where you want to be able to use some of that real time data to do fine tuning. I think all those use cases can potentially be very heavily dependent on logs, but I think with where we're at right now, I think with the right tools, I think all of those data volumes are manageable.
Now let's talk about the management side of this data. We talked about the volume. What kind of future, what kind of vision you see is going to be there for big data management?
One of the big innovations that we really pushed for at Hydrolix was, our co-founder Hassan sort of had this realization that these data volumes are massive, and having to keep physical disks around, having to keep hot disk infrastructure around for this data scale was going to become not only prohibitively expensive, but just painful from just like um, a physical size perspective, like being able to manage that much infrastructure. And really pushed for, hey, how can we use object storage as a way to be our primary data store? So essentially, kind of removing that separation of hot and cold storage, and just essentially letting your quote unquote cold storage be your hot storage. And so that shift, that paradigm shift, to saying like, how can we optimize network access? How can we optimize compression? How can we use these access patterns that object storage affords us to be able to drive that performance? And so that's really the place where we kind of we're able to take the economics of object storage, the efficiency of object storage. It's effectively a perfectly elastic storage tier. You don't have to think about spinning up new nodes with new disks. It's always there for you. Being able to take advantage of that and use that as the primary store really solves a lot of these underlying problems. And I think done right. And again, this is a lot of what we focused on here at Hydraulics. How do you actually use that to manage a more stateless architecture? How do you make it easier to scale up your intake? Bringing logs into the platform. How do you use that to scale up query performance? And so I think in a lot of ways we've really kind of moved towards this architecture where optimizing for object storage solves a lot of these problems simultaneously, and gives us the ability to be able to go after these large data volumes, solve a lot of these scaling challenges, and really kind of optimize for what customers are looking for, which is really how do I keep more data for longer periods of time and be able to manage those peaks and troughs. It's customers don't they like to think they know what their plan is for a large event or for the future, seasonality, but those things are really truly impossible to predict perfectly. And so being able to give customers the flexibility to scale up, scale down, kind of have this effectively infinite scale on the back end for storage and retention. That's really kind of the perfect story to tell customers that are really trying to struggle with these data volumes. At the end of the day, they don't want to have to put a ton of energy into planning for this stuff. They want to just say, you know, here's about what I think. I want you to handle it, and bill me for whatever whatever it ends up being. And being able to kind of get that perfect hands off kind of scenario for customers is ideal.
Excellent, thank you. Can you talk about what kind of things hydraulics will be working on this year? Once again, looking at these challenges, opportunities in the market.
A lot of our existing customer relationships come through deep partnership we have with Akamai. We're obviously looking for similar partnerships with AWS, with GCP. Looking for more places to expand our product offering so that we can access, again, kind of coming back to a lot of these high volume use cases, like how do we expand into other CDN markets, web application firewalls. How do we tap into those and really make it easy for our customers to say, here is a service that I use. How do I monitor effectively? And kind of take out that guesswork. They shouldn't have to do a lot of estimation to say, how much traffic is this thing going to generate from a logs perspective, and how much resource do I need to handle that? So being able to take that kind of planning out of the equation for them. So I think we're going to see a lot more on the partnership side. We've got some new product offerings that we're trying to bring up on those other cloud providers. One of the big reasons that I came on board is we also see a lot of opportunities in the kind of on-premise markets. So this could be, truly like an air-gapped environment where we want to be able to deploy hydraulics in a place where it's not physically connected to the internet. So how do we bundle that? How do we package that in a way that makes it easy for customers to manage? Everything that we built runs under Kubernetes, so that part of it is relatively straightforward for a lot of customers. But how do we do container management in a secure environment? How do we give end users the tools to be able to do a lot of what our service delivery team does right now, which is capacity planning and management, working with customers to handle big events and things like that. So we're going to see a lot of that, and then just in general, kind of continue on the path of technical innovation, looking for more ways that we can improve performance, more ways that we can connect with other systems. We just launched a Spark connector. We've got a Splunk connector. So really looking at kind of how do end users integrate with logs? What other tools do they use? Because we really want to see ourselves as again, coming back to it's a real-time streaming data lake for logs. So how do we let customers leverage that piece of the technology without having to completely replace the rest of their tooling? And so, obviously Spark, Databricks, Snowflake, there are a lot of these kind of established tools and companies in the space. How do we help those customers and end users keep using that same tool set, but leverage the cost efficiencies and performance efficiencies that hydraulics can bring for that logging data and let it play within that existing ecosystem?
Todd, thank you so much for joining me today, and of course, talk about your role in the company, and of course, what are the things we should be looking forward with from the perspective of Hydrolix this year. Thanks for great insights, and as usual, I look forward to chat with you folks again. Thank you.
Thanks again. Thanks for having me.